After the arrival of the behind-the-scenes featurette on the making of The Mandalorian Season 2 finale on Disney+, one thing that struck me almost right away was how the creative team involved in bringing Luke Skywalker to this series differed so greatly from those involved in the same character's appearance across the Star Wars sequel trilogy films. What really stood out from the behind-the-scenes interviews and footage was Jon Favreau's passion and respect for the universe that George Lucas created. The way he spoke with such reverence for what came before really resonated with me, and no doubt many others who watched that featurette. In it, he said, quote, "I think there's an interplay with storytellers and the people you're telling the story to. You find that the emotions run very deep with Star Wars, and people's relationship who grew up with it from a young age feel a lot of connection to it. I think the one consistent thing I'm feeling, that people care deeply that it's being handled correctly, and that it's being handled respectfully. It meant so much, and they want to see it continue into the future and feel like it's all connected with consistency." His comments, to me, stand in stark contrast to what we have heard and continue to hear from those who have been involved in many of the new Disney Star Wars projects. These controversial moves and actions on the part of senior Lucasfilm employees have been well documented, and I won't go into them here, but suffice it to say they often come across as disrespectful to large portions of the fan base. This stands vastly different to how the team that produced The Mandalorian Season 2 finale were speaking about the fandom and the use of Luke as the guy, the hero of the Star Wars franchise. Interestingly, in the latest featurette, Favreau goes on to talk about the support and encouragement he's gotten from several at Lucasfilm, including Kathleen Kennedy in their development of The Mandalorian. And later, he talks about what a great producer Kathleen Kennedy is, and how much she helps the creative team to have the tools they need to be successful in enacting their vision. Here I think is where a clear divide at Lucasfilm can be seen. While I have no doubt that Kathleen Kennedy is very supportive of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni's efforts on The Mandalorian, she has also been very supportive and active in the production of all of Lucasfilm's projects, especially those that have disenfranchised so many longtime Star Wars fans. In a previous video, I likened Kennedy to a used car salesman, someone who will say what she needs to say in order to sell the product that is Star Wars. And in my opinion, there are obviously too many at Lucasfilm who view Star Wars as a platform and a product, rather than a beloved modern mythology that needs to be preserved. As a longtime fan of Star Wars, I grew up with the adventures of Luke Skywalker, Leia Organa, and Han Solo. I felt a connection with their stories and admired their noble qualities and related to their struggles. To feel that in a universe that was so expansive and fantastic was amazing in of itself. It was the best form of escapism. Luke Skywalker was and always will be my favorite character. He embodied hope and optimism and consistently looked for the good in people. He was always there for his friends, no matter the cost to himself. This is the Luke that could be found in the pages of the Star Wars Expanded Universe novels, which have long since been decanonized by Disney Lucasfilm. The Luke that was presented in the sequel trilogy was a far cry from this character. To add insult to injury, it was made clear by those involved with the new films that this was done intentionally to avoid giving fans what they were expecting. This wasn't just the case with the character of Luke, as several other legacy characters had also gotten the same treatment. And so, like many others, I felt largely disconnected from the stories featured in the sequel trilogy. And from the interviews and articles that have come out since, it's clear that most of the creative teams that were involved in those films never demonstrated or talked about Star Wars in a way that resonated with me as a fan. The results from the differing approaches have been clear, and it seems now that there are two different visions for Star Wars playing out for Lucasfilm. One that is determined to show the proper respect for what came before, and one that is determined to diminish what came before in order to prop up something new. When I first heard how Favreau was talking about The Mandalorian in a red carpet interview, he said almost exactly what I would want those who are working on new Star Wars content to say, so I was intrigued.
Well, that's the thing, with especially with Star Wars, but always, you want to make sure, if you're making it and the fans don't dig what you're doing, I don't know that I can keep doing it. Like, part of it, a big part of it is that you want to you want to connect. You want to connect with the fans. When you're taking on something like Star Wars, I didn't create Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars, and so you want to make sure you're servicing it in a way that's respectful to what came before, and in a way that is hopefully delights the audience and the fans.
So yes, Jon Favreau was saying all the right things that I, as a Star Wars fan, wanted to hear. But because of what we had gotten from Lucasfilm prior to The Mandalorian, I remained skeptical. It really wasn't until the end of The Mandalorian Season 2 that I really had reason for hope in what Jon Favreau was trying to do with Star Wars. I know I'm not alone in this. The arrival of Luke Skywalker in the Season 2 finale sent shockwaves through the fandom. The thunderous shouts of joy and approval were an undeniable sign that the Star Wars fandom can be united. However, when I look at the current state of Star Wars, I believe that instead of trying to make content that everyone will enjoy, Lucasfilm seems to be taking a compartmentalized approach, making content that will primarily appeal to small sections of the fandom. I feel like Star Wars has gotten so far from what made it great. What was universally beloved in 1977 has now been split up into content catered to specific demographics. That being said, I'm not expecting anything to change, and I'd much rather focus on what I enjoy rather than all the things I don't. Overall, I'm thrilled with what Favreau has done with his corner of Star Wars, especially when compared to everything else I've seen since Disney's acquisition of the property. While I have almost zero interest in most of the other reported projects in development under the Star Wars banner, I am excited to see what Favreau has planned. I'm really starting to appreciate the difference between creative directors who really love the spirit of the properties they are working on versus those who are simply using the properties as a way to call attention to their own vision. In regards to Star Wars, the results of each of these approaches are clear. And I'm glad to say that at least for now, Jon Favreau has given me reason to believe that not all hope is lost. But I'm curious to know what you think about Jon Favreau's comments and approach to making Star Wars content. Do you agree that there seems to be two separate visions for Star Wars at Lucasfilm? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.